Happy Wednesday. So great to see you. Feels like it's been forever since I saw you last week. If you're new, welcome. This is an amazing community where every single Wednesday we have a weekly meeting where we talk to successful CEOs, amazing executives, and all around just interesting humans to learn from them, learn how they present themselves to the world, how they talk about what they do, and ultimately their secrets to success. Then we copy their homework and implement it into our own lives. So I'm so excited for our chat today because we have someone who I have been a fan of for a very, very long time. And I think you are also going to be a fan of him as well. His name is Patrick. He's an amazing CEO and founder of an awesome company called brandyourself.com. I'll kind of give you the skinny if you haven't already Googled him, which hopefully you did. He's an amazing founder. He's really experienced in not only his business, which he's had for quite a number of years now, but also raising funding, which he's done the traditional way, and also on a little show called Shark Tank and Dragon's Den as well. He's been honored by the White House. He's been on Inc. 35 Under 35 list, and all around, he's just a super nice human. So I'm really excited for you to meet Patrick today. So welcome to the party, Patrick. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing so well. It's one of those things where I feel like the weeks fly by and then are really slow all at once.
Yes.
So as crazy as that is. But are you a caffeine drinker?
I most definitely am. I've got a big one. So probably too much caffeine.
I can't hear you. Can everybody else hear Patrick, or is it just me?
Let me try this.
Can you hear me, Patrick?
I can. Is this any better?
You can. Okay. Well,
can you hear me now?
Hopefully get it figured out. In the meantime, Kelly and Jeff and everybody, can you guys hear Patrick? Because if it's just me, then we can just roll with it. We can hear him. Okay. You can hear him, so that's good news.
Let's try this.
I don't know
can
why
you hear
I
me
can't
now?
hear him, but that's fine. I can read lips. We can go with it.
You hear me better right now?
As long as everybody else can hear you, right? I'm playing with my, oh wait, you know what I can do? You guys, it's live. This is what we have to deal with. Mic and camera, audio. Yeah, I don't know. My audio is like not working. So strange. Couldn't tell you. Okay, let's roll with it because everybody else can hear you, Patrick. So let's just go. And if I look crazy, you can tell me. Okay, so one of the things that I feel like we just need to dive in with is why you have so many interests. Again, I know you well, but for anybody that hasn't Googled, Patrick is he is a writer, he's a contributor, he teaches, and obviously is the CEO of a company. So I'm so curious, like, why online branding, Patrick? Like, what did you wake up one day and you were like, I've got it, online branding?
No, so we've been running the company for nearly 10 years. And it actually started because my co-founder at the time, he was having trouble getting an internship because he was being looked up. And this was obviously the early days of people screening people online. And he was being mistaken for a criminal with the same name. That was kind of easy to mistake him for. And that's when we kind of realized that, as an individual, like if you think about it, you do look people up online, and what shows up is that, bad things can hurt you, good things can really help you. And there weren't a lot of tools out there for individuals. When Pete, my co-founder, went to go look for solutions, this idea of reputation management or branding, whatever you want to call it, was pretty big in the enterprise or corporate or business world. But Pete was unable to, find a quote that made sense as an individual. And that was kind of where the whole idea started, which is how do individuals kind of manage their own online presence in a way that gives them control over how important this kind of impression really is.
And do you think, is it hard for you? Because obviously now you've been doing it for a number of years, like 11 years later after you started the business, like, do you still wake up passionate about it? Or are you kind of like, all right, it's been 11 years and it's working?
Yeah, I mean, obviously doing anything for a long time, you have your ups and downs. But in terms of an overall mission, I feel like our mission has been able to kind of evolve because, if you really back up, the thesis is just that we live our lives online. And how do you take advantage of that without kind of getting any of the kind of unintended consequences? There's reputational risk combined with reputational benefit. There's privacy and security risk. So as the companies evolve, we've just kept adding things that help allow people to kind of take advantage of the web while protecting themselves against privacy risk, security risk, reputational risk. So there's always been more exciting things that kind of evolve the company into, which is how I think it's remained a big passion.
I mean, especially with technology, I feel like there's always a new thing. I was laughing with a friend the other day because everyone was like, yay, Instagram Reels came out. And every single business owner or social media person I knew was like, no, not another platform. We always have to be on Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and this. It was like, another one, really?
Yeah.
So
it can be overwhelming.
I can only imagine. Okay, so how does someone, how would you even suggest that people start? Because I think what's so hard to me about online reputations is it just seems like there's so much to do that you almost get analysis paralysis. What's a good baby step if someone was like, okay, I want to try to do this?
So I think the very first thing that people should realize is that everybody needs to be caring about this. If you're professionally minded, and I can get into all the reasons why, against protecting yourself against future negatives or all the opportunity you might be able to get. But the very first step is just committing to building some sort of online presence, which is a big barrier for people. So just even kind of getting started and having something like a personal website or just being active on LinkedIn. So I would say the very first thing is realizing that understanding the benefits of doing it and just committing to having an online presence. I think the second thing is also kind of auditing your current online presence. I think a lot of people don't realize they might have a bigger one than they realize, because even if they're not really active, you don't know what you're being tagged in. You don't know if people have written about you, good or bad. So doing an initial audit and committing to have some sort of online presence, I think, is a really important first step.
And so if I wanted to audit myself, is it literally just hey, let me Google my name? Because maybe people haven't even Googled themselves in a while.
Yeah. I think the very first thing you should do is, one, Google yourself. And what's funny about it is, if I'm speaking to people or I'm speaking to, say, a class or on a seminar, I always say, how many people here have Googled somebody else? And everybody will raise their hands, and you say, did you use that information to form an opinion on that person? Whether it was, do I work with them, or what should I be talking about? And everyone says, of course. You ask everyone if they've Googled themselves. Most people have said yes, right? Most people have Googled themselves. You then ask, how many people here think it's a proper representation? It would give someone the right impression. Really be the information you think they should know upon meeting you. Most people will admit it's not, but then they haven't done anything about it. So the first step is, yes, Googling yourself. And I think the second step is auditing your own social media, because social media, even if it's not showing up in Google, is increasingly being used in things like employment screenings or school screenings, or even if you're traveling or applying for immigration visas, or now they're going to start using it for lending and credit decisions. So they use technology to audit your own profile. So giving yourself a social media audit is also an important thing to do, to just make sure you're representing yourself in the way that you need to be.
And let's say, Jeff brings up such a good point. So let's say you do Google yourself or look at yourself and you notice oh no, there's false or just wrong information about me on the web. What do you do?
So obviously this is something we encounter all the time, right? So, and there's a bunch of different categories, right? Because a negative, I think it's important just to start off by saying a negative thing can happen to anyone online. And it could be, it could be someone trashing you online or even harassing you online. Just to give an extreme example of that is, we deal with a lot of victims of revenge porn, right? Which is, someone posting obviously unflattering and non-consensual things about you online. And obviously that's going to be embarrassing or damaging, all the way to maybe you've posted something stupid in the past, or it could be someone you used to work with, like you fire someone and they write something nasty about you online. It could also be something that's old and embarrassing, like an old divorce record, or it could be somebody else that shares a name with you, like my co-founder's situation, but it's impacting you in a certain way. So there's a whole range of ways something can show up about you online that you don't want. In each case, the first thing you'd want to do is see if you can get it removed. There are rare cases, but important ones where you can get things directly removed from either the web or at least Google's index. So one thing I mentioned, for example, is if something's with non-consensual pornography, for example, or online harassment. A lot of times there's ways you can use Google or wherever they're posted forms and get them taken down by going through a certain process. It's often overly complicated and lengthy, but there are things you can do to get removed. Another way is something known as a DMCA takedown. Mm-hmm. So, let's say, an example we have is someone's like, there's an old MySpace account that this photo's been used. It was actually someone I know had called me, and they work in a legal firm in New York. They managed to make a nice successful life. And someone they had gone to high school with and haven't seen since high school had 15 years had passed, and in that time they committed like a really horrific and newsworthy crime down in like Florida, and the local paper wrote about it with the guy's name, and the image they pulled from the web was from a MySpace profile they found of the guy. And the person who called me just happened to be in that MySpace photo. They were at like some sort of high school party, and he had gotten a few calls, and he's like, if you read the article, it's not like he was being accused of anything, but he's like, this is not a great look that I'm in this photo with this guy who, ended up doing something really bad. And like I said, I don't really know him. I haven't spoke to him in 15 years. And in the DMCA takedown, he was able to actually show he had taken the picture, which means he owned the copyright and was able to get it taken down via what's known as a DMCA takedown. And there are certain instances where this is a good example where I think reaching out to the editor, like if someone wrote something bad about you, the editors clearly want to keep it up and they don't have to take it down. But in cases like this, they'd probably be willing to take it down if you explained, look, this has nothing to do with the merits of the article, but it's causing harm to this person. So in short, there are certain ways to take certain things down, but they're going to be, few and far between.
Totally.
So in the case where you can't get something taken down, your next best bet is to kind of bury it and surround it with accurate or more relevant or flattering things. So, let's say, hey, you fired one person even though you've managed 100, but the only thing showing up is this one negative review where someone called you, a big jerk. But you're able to create an online presence that shows all these other great things, and you suddenly make that harder to find. It's going to have a much smaller impact on you. So if you can't remove something, what you want to do is surround it with things that balance the story out. And that's the biggest, I think, issue. A lot of people, the average individual, who's just your average professional, unless they're really a terrible person, they're not going to have a lot of bad things out there about them. But if they don't have a good online presence,
by the way. Yeah. Like like all of us, like Richard and Nick and Cassie and Kelly and Jen, like me, like we're not killers. So we're just trying to manage our online presence, like just keeping it clean. Hopefully we come up on page 1 of Google. Hopefully the pictures are nice and, we're smiling and good stuff. And one thing you did say about social media that I want to point out, because I learned this recently, and I was like, good to know. Twitter doesn't delete any of your tweets, like ever. So if 5 years ago you tweeted something that maybe today might not be the most wonderful of tweets, people can dig that up about you. and people can find that. And so Twitter has rolled out a feature where you can search for different keywords and search for different things. I'll drop it in the comments, but you can go back, and I have another friend, I'll have to figure out which one this is, but she has it set to auto delete her tweets. So after 1 year, her tweets will just auto delete. I don't have that set up yet, and I can't actually remember what program that is. I don't know if you know what program that is, Patrick.
Yeah, there's a few, and you're exactly right.
Okay.
Left to your own, it's not going to delete itself. And like things that can get taken out of context years later, and a lot of things that seem innocent at the time, and I can give some examples of things that sneak up on people, like even things that you wouldn't think about, like joking when you're 23 about skipping work to watch Game of Thrones, and you meant that as a joke to your 20 followers. All of a sudden gets looked at an employment screening and automatically gets flagged as unprofessional, 10 years later. It becomes an issue. So like we have a tool, for example, that's free where we'll actually scan all your social media properties. You can set it to delete old things, or you can even delete specific things that would likely get flagged during an employment screening and quickly delete it from there. Because there's a lot of need, I think, to give people control over everything they've ever posted or been tagged in. How do you screen that really quickly? Because it's difficult. So we have tools that are free. There's tools like you mentioned, like tweet delete tools.
We love free things. This group of gang.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we offer a lot of free screening tools where you can put in your name and it'll do a free scan and show you things that would likely, raise eyebrows.
Oh, I haven't done that yet. Do I just go to brainyourself.com and they're just on there?
Yeah, so you sign up for a free account, and then you can do a social media scan. It'll say clean up social media, and it will show you all the things that would likely get flagged. In fact, it's actually such a good tool that we've actually been contacted by most of like the online screening companies and background check companies who've wanted to use it to actually screen candidates, which again is kind of the opposite of what we want to do. But it basically puts you one step ahead of like people who are going to try to scour the entire web to find, just to find things that could be flagged. And 9 out of 10 are just, things you weren't thinking about in the right context, 10 years ago. And we can just show you that right off the bat.
100%. So I feel like during this pandemic, during all this work from home time, I have tried to like Maria Kondo my life, just kind of like clean up house a little bit, all the things that were always on the to-do list, but kind of like fell to the bottom of the to-do list. Kind of did, but not really. And so one of the things it sounds like is I need to go to brainyourself.com and run my stuff through there. But are there 2 or 3 other things you mentioned before? And maybe that's one of the answers to kind of get kimkalp.com or get your name, whatever your name is.com. Like, what are 2 or 3 things that as people are in this like weird pandemic, work from home, maybe a little bit of extra time on their hands, things that they can do that would probably be like a good idea?
Yeah. You just named one of them. Everyone should try to get their domain, yourname.com, yourname.org, yourname.net. Even if you're not building a website on it right away, it's kind of really important real estate because, if you need to promote yourself later, and I can go into how important personal branding actually is, because just as negative things can hurt you, positive things can help you. But having that real estate, so the other, Patrick Ambron doesn't all of a sudden have that, domain name, is a really powerful thing. I think the second thing that everyone should do is just build, besides a personal website, build 3 to 5 properties. And some are obvious, like a LinkedIn. It could be a Twitter. It could be, a Quora profile where you're answering questions. Because once you have like 3 to 5 things, you start owning that. They kind of work together, and you can kind of own that first page of Google a lot easier.
Cassie brings up a good point. When you do get all these things, remember your logins. You're going to have a hard time getting back in later.
Absolutely. A password manager can be really helpful with that.
I just started using LastPass.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know. Do you use that?
I use a different one. I use 1Password, but same exact idea.
I just started, someone recommended it on our other Wednesday meeting. And so everyone else was like, oh, I already have that. And I felt left out. So now I have it.
Another thing you might want to do as well is I don't know if you guys have, if you've ever seen, if you've looked up yourself and you see kind of your name and personal info on some of those data brokers or people search sites like a My Life or Been Verified or Intellius, those places where they kind of create profiles about people, then sell it. So it'll have things like your address on it, your relatives, all this kind of information. One thing you could do is remove yourself from them as well, because that actually puts you kind of at risk of spam, identity theft, stalking, or doxing, and all sorts of risk, because that stuff shows up pretty high for people. And there's ways you can remove yourself from that. Each of them, there's probably like 80 of them in the US. Each of them, if you go to the bottom, has a do not or delete my info. They have to now legally. Okay. And each of them have a process where you can get yourself off of them. Again, brand yourself as a free tool that will show you all the ones you're on and automate the process for you. But
you guys are like little Harry Potter wizards.
Yeah, like we've been building these tools, like I said, as needs have evolved over the last 10 years, the types of things you want to do to control your online presence. We try to create free tools. And then obviously there's premium features on all of them if you want more advanced help, but free things that kind of put people back in the driver's seat. So I would remove personal info from the web. I would get your domain name. I'd try to create 3 to 5 profiles that at least you can kind of own those, first 5 results in search engines. That also helps, like, should someone ever write something negative about you in the future, it's got something to compete with now. That's what we were kind of getting at before, which is if you're the average professional and you haven't built an online presence, and then that one person goes right anonymously on Glassdoor that you were a jerk, it has nothing to compete with, right? It's going to be your number one result. But if you have 5 properties that you keep up, with a lot of content, suddenly it's not going to be as easy for that thing to suddenly rank and be the most important, the most dominant thing on your search results. So,
and I'm curious for you. So one of the things that I feel like and I don't know if anybody else, in the group has this, but if you told me to do this for Patrick, I would have no problem. I'd be like, oh, Patrick's a star and here's his website. I'm going to get the .com and da-da. But doing it for myself is very hard. I find it to be very hard to represent myself online. So I know for me, like, I got from calp.com, so check. But now, like, trying to redo the website is like kind of challenging. And so how do you, again, it's so much easier for me to do it for other people. So I'm curious what everybody else has to say. And Patrick, I'd love to hear your thoughts, because you have to represent you online, unless you have like a CMO or some marketing person that does it for you.
That's a really good question. And one of the barriers we see individuals have all the time is just having trouble promoting themselves online because it's against their nature. The first thing I would say is, like it or not, I don't think it's a good thing. But if you're not promoting yourself online, you're missing opportunities. Like I wrote an article, I think for Ad Age or Ad Week or something, that said shameless self-promoters are taking over your industry. And we all know what that is, which is people, you're like, you don't even know how they have the time to constantly be posting and promoting themselves. But the truth of the matter is you can't get rewarded if you don't get noticed. And this isn't new. There's a saying in business known as CYA, or cover your ass. And a lot of you probably know it, which is, if you're on behalf of your company, if you're, buying a big software, bringing on a tool that you're going to use, CMS, that's going to be, and if you pick the wrong one, it's going to be, your butt on the line. So, they look for things that, verify. Like, you can't get mad at me. Look at the research. This is clearly a good tool. I did my homework. The same goes for hiring an individual. It's like, if I look someone up and I find something negative, am I going to put, I'm going to hire that person if they don't work out? Or I look up someone and I find nothing, and I look up someone and it shows they're really credible in the industry and they have a lot of thoughts on the industry. That person's clearly going to have an advantage. Now, the issue right now is, I'd argue there's an inverse relationship right now between people who are really good at promoting themselves online a lot of times and people who are actually good at what they promote themselves for. And I think the first step is just realizing that, this isn't new. Like, you have to get your stuff out there in some way. That doesn't mean you have to be slimy or overly promotional. But if you don't exist online, you're gonna miss opportunity. And something right now, there was a stat that said 60% of employers won't even interview you if they can't find you online. It's just a red flag. And that was, I think, done by Career Builder. So it's kind of a necessary evil, but there's also a way to do it that can support your brand, even if that brand is understated or humble. But there's nothing bad with having a nice LinkedIn profile or a nice website or and it doesn't have to be a big barrier. Like, one thing you could do is spend time once a month of thinking about something you want to write about in your industry. It could just be responding to a really good article you read about your field and saying, just read this article. I think it was great because of X, Y, and Z. I kind of disagreed with this. It's not that work. It shows you're thoughtful, and then, put that on your LinkedIn, make a little blog post about it. It doesn't take that much work, and you could take whatever tone you want, but suddenly you're creating content out there that checks that box for people, which is, I've got to know that you're active in your industry, especially if you're going for bigger and bigger opportunities.
And I love the question that was just posted, which is it better to have those quality? It's always the quantity versus quantity question, right? Like, do you have quality posts that are happening once a week and they're really great? Or, to your point of like the shameless self-promoters are taking over your industry, is it better to just spew out sort of as much as you can and maybe it's not the best?
So it depends on your goals. I think, quality over trumps quantity in most situations, right? It's a rule of thumb that, has lived on before this, will live on after it. I think, the first thing I think most people have to do, I call it the due diligence stage. You might not try, if you're not trying to build a big audience, or you're not trying to, really, really promote yourself, you're just in the due diligence stage, which is if someone's already looking you up, that person you met for the job interview, the person you met at a networking event, you just want to make sure you have enough quality content to check that box. They found you, it reinforces your qualifications. Everybody should at least do that. And that's where most people are going to fall. And in that case, it's absolutely a quality versus quantity thing. You're trying to just make sure you're reinforcing the small audience that already matters, right? Mm-hmm. The person who might hire you, the person who might, refer you. If you're trying to take it one step further, which is a smaller group of people, actually build an audience, then quantity becomes important. So the trick becomes, you should do quality and quantity, right? You need to post more often. And, that's the $1 million question. But I think if you're just trying to make sure you're checking the right boxes so you're not losing opportunities that you would otherwise get, high quality, lower quantity, that you just make sure people can find and you check the right boxes.
And I love this question from Jeff because, when you were talking about earlier, the search results and coming up and someone's trying to hire you and whatnot, the Twitter comes up high on the Google search, but does Instagram also now as well, or is it more just Twitter?
Instagram very rarely will show up as high as Twitter.
Okay.
Search engines love Twitter because it's the whole site defaults to public, so it has a higher kind of authority index. Instagram can show up high for people's names, but it's usually for people who have so much public content on it that it's the exception that proves the rule. Instagram's hard to rank on your first page. Yeah.
So there are so many online updates and things that are happening. How do you, Patrick, I know you have a whole team, so you can cheat a little, but how do you stay up to date on online branding updates? Like, is there a certain newsletter you follow or a Twitter account that you follow? Like, how do you stay up to date?
A lot of it is just kind of, I use Twitter as a almost like a news feed where, I kind of I try to pay attention to what's going on and try to, again, a lot of what we do is, a lot of our companies around protecting online privacy, things that are related to online reputation and things that are related to personal branding. So just following kind of things going on in that world. And
is there a certain person or like account that you're like, I always follow Bob or Sarah?
I'd have to think about that a bit more. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
You can drop it in the comments like tomorrow or the next day when you're like, oh, I remember that.
Yes.
Because I'm so curious, but it's good to know. Do you tweet, or are you just a reader but not a tweeter?
I'm mostly a reader.
Okay.
I more consume the content than create it.
100%. 100%. I'm curious. So like how, obviously with all of these updates and working from home and changing, the industry very, very quickly with everyone being online now and everyone trying to do updates, how have you been staying productive and, some semblance of normal during this time?
That's I think it's been tough for everyone, right? It's there's less, we're all working from home mostly. The work-life line has really been blurring. And then on top of that, you can't do much. So you're more inundated with all this information. So I think it's just like anything. You try to kind of set a few goals and keep focus. Try not to kind of get distracted by things that you wouldn't have before. But it is tough. One thing I've done in general is I've never been much of a morning person, but I think now like the new dynamic of waking up in bed and just kind of like walking over to your chair and you're in the office all day is like that's kind of a bad transition. So now I've been making sure like I do something like exercise in the mornings before I get started to at least like, and then you have to put on your work clothes and stuff. So just creating a routine that separates that, hey, I'm like sleeping to before starting the office. That used to be your commute. Trying to create some sort of barrier I found is like creates a sense of normalcy in general.
I feel like one of the things that I've been trying to do, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but obviously, living in Manhattan, I would commute like, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes to the office. So there and back. And I used to listen to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever. And so now I've kind of told myself, okay, for 20 or 25 or 30 minutes a day, my commute time in the schedule, I have to dedicate that to learning something. So I've been trying to, everything from SEO, which by the way, I'm still sort of terrible at, but I'm learning, baby steps. And so like, that's one of the things that I take things that I'm getting a little lost on, where I'm like, I hear people talk about SEO, but I don't really know what it is. Like, and then saying, okay, I have to dedicate 30 minutes to figuring out what the heck everybody's talking about. So have you continued to like learn during this time, or is it more like, oh my God, I just have to try to right the ship?
So it's interesting. So I've done something similar, which is, so my commute used to be like I would bring my dog to my office. So I'd walk my dog in the morning and then on the way back, and call that a 45-minute commute each way. And during that time, that's when I would typically listen to a podcast or an audiobook or whatever it was I was, learning or whatever it was. And that hour and a half was great for that. And part of my morning routine is trying to recreate that. It's like still go on that, 45-minute walk, even though you're not really going anywhere, and try to do the same thing. So I've used that time similar to you, that kind of commute was a good time to learn outside of your exact day to day. And I've tried to recreate that. I probably don't do it an hour and a half a day. I don't really have the energy anymore to like create a 45-minute, minute commute for no reason at the end of the day. But I also think it's okay for people to, also take a step back if they're overwhelmed and use that for whatever you want to call it, self-care or, but I still think replace a lot, sometimes I use my commute for that, to just unwind and listen to something that has nothing to do with learning. But trying to create that, I think is a good thing to do for either learning or otherwise, even if it's relaxation.
No, you definitely still need entertainment. You still need like fun and music and trashy TV and all that, which, speaking of trashy TV, I'll be killed if I don't ask this question, because I know I get asked about it all the time, which is, you and I were both on Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
You were on Dragon's Den. I was not. But for anybody that doesn't know, Dragon's Den is basically Shark Tank for like Canada. I think it also airs in the UK and like maybe a couple other locations. But I have to say that Patrick was like the brave one that went before. He was the season before mine. So I got like a full download. But I'm so curious from you, what has surprised you the most? Because I know what surprised me, like since the show has aired, but what surprised you the most, post Shark Tank, Dragon's Den?
So we did Shark Tank, and I mean, I think we filmed it in 2014. It aired 2015, so it was a long time ago. I think I was surprised by, and I think for us, which might be a slightly different for you, is we have consumer-facing tools that anyone can use. Like we don't have it's anybody should be using it, so the whole audience can sign up, and we don't have any inventory or geographic limitations. So for us, it was just an influx of almost advertising that we could never have expected. And I think what surprised me was not just how big that uptick was, but how good the long tail has been. And the long tail meaning like just all the extra press you get from it becomes great for long-term SEO. You build a bit of a brand name, and then things even like a lot of consumers really trust the Shark Tank name. So, thankfully we were portrayed well on the show that, you're able to use that for everything from convincing someone to say, sign up if they, because there's trust to it, or even using it for partnerships down the line. And that was kind of our logic. So we did Dragon's Den, and you're right. Dragon's Den was actually the original show based in the UK. It's not as big of a market as the US. So US one has gotten way bigger. But we were starting to grow in the UK pretty quickly, and we realized what better opportunity, considering how good Shark Tank was for in the US, we should try to do it in the UK. So we went and did it again and had a similar experience. Again, not nearly as big. It's a much smaller market. But I think it was surprising how much the consumers really value the brand of as a credibility booster and the long tail effect of that.
Oh, 100%. I love this question from Jeff too, because you actually, sorry if anybody hasn't watched Patrick's episode, I'll spoiler alert. He had raised traditional funding before going on Shark Tank. So some people have, some people haven't, but do you think it's too early? Like, is there a better way? Did you find that it was harder? Would you have rather gone on the show without raising funds beforehand?
The question is, I think it depends on the situation. I would say, raising from Shark Tank is a bit unusual. I wouldn't use it as like your primary vehicle if you can avoid it to try to raise funding. The deals are a bit more aggressive than you're going to get from traditional investors. Like I said, a lot goes on afterwards, depending on what the sharks might want for a deal or anything like that. But the question I saw pop up was, is it too early to go on Shark Tank if you're pre-revenue?
Yeah.
And I think you have to look at what your goals of going on Shark Tank are. There's obviously the funding, which, like I said, could be good or bad, depending on what you're looking to raise. The second reason is because it gives you exposure and customers. The third is just credibility.
Right.
Like the second kind of bucket there for exposure is the ideal time is if Shark Tank can get you customers, you want to make sure you're in a place to take advantage of it. Like if you're a company that's like, hey, we're a local Boston shop, and you don't sell online, Shark Tank's not going to help you from that regard, right? It's not going to get you a ton of customers, but maybe it gets you credibility in the local area. People want to check out the place that went on Shark Tank. But I know people who've gone on and, they weren't quite ready to scale up inventory. So it's like, even though they had all these people wanting to buy, it wasn't the ideal time to go on because they weren't really ready to fulfill all the
orders.
So I think the right time to go on Shark Tank is when you can take advantage of all three of those things to the best of your ability. You're ready for the right type of investment. You're ready for all the exposure it would bring and so forth. If you're not ready for I'd wait until you were ready for those to take advantage of them to the fullest before you go on the show.
No, I totally agree, for sure. Well, I'm officially almost halfway through this, which means it's time for sort of like the caffeine jolted speed round questions.
Sure.
Pew, pew. That's what I would text you right now if we were texting with the little lasers. So they're little softballs, but hopefully you can knock them out of the park. Okay, what is the best app or program that you've started using recently that you are like, this is the coolest thing ever, or the best thing I've downloaded in a while?
So I've been using, which I really like, something called Blinkist. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
no, what is it?
It's essentially like a new age, like Cliff Notes or Spark Notes for like business or, nonfiction books. So, you hear, I think you could agree that, 90% of business books could be like half the size. You get the main concept, but like, they have to make a full book out of it and you feel like you wasted time. So this does a really good job of like distilling all the merits of a book that you were interested in, like in like 10 to 15 minutes of like bullet point reading. And then if it seemed more interesting than that, you can add it to your reading list. Otherwise, it's a quick way to cycle through things you've been hearing about that you want to read without having to commit to reading, a 150-page book that you needed 10 pages of.
And is it Blink List, like List, or IST, IST, Blinkist?
IST, Blinkist.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna get that. I have not heard of that, but anything that's like Cliff Notes,
yeah,
I'm all about the Cliff Notes life.
Yep.
Okay, what is the best gift that you've given yourself? So not other people, but the gift that you've given yourself or done for yourself in the last year?
In the last year, this one's going to sound like because this is a big commitment. Not everyone can do it, but getting a dog was a big thing for me. Yeah, adopting a dog.
What's the dog name?
I don't want to say it because she's going to come running over here if she hears it, because she's in the apartment and she will run over. But we I wanted to get one, and like I said, it's good to have something else besides work to like think and care about. Like I said, it makes you go on walks. It's something that you invest emotional energy in. That's not your business, which I think as an entrepreneur that sometimes becomes an issue. Like having other things in your life that take some sort of emotional balance out of it. So to me, I never look back. It was great. So that I would say that.
That's a big gift. I love that. Okay, what is your favorite podcast or newsletter or resource that you learn from? So not that you enjoy, not like trashy TV, but that you actually are like, oh, I learned something with that.
So there's a newsletter and there's a corresponding podcast, which is it's called The Hustle. And what it does is it does a really good job of like breaking down business trends going on. They could be big, what's going on in the public markets. It's kind of like the Skim, if you ever heard of the Skim, but for like business news. Now, the tone of it isn't always great. Like if you can overlook the tone, sometimes it's a bit like too, I think it can come off a bit as what's known as like tech bro-y, which some people like, some people don't. However, the information in it, a lot of the information is actually really well researched, regardless of the tone. And I really like that because you read it and you're like, oh, I had no idea this was going on. That's where I found out about, TikTok acquisition talks, or you find out about, there's a trend going on of like online plants where like cactus and succulents are going through the root. Like you find out all these interesting things that you wouldn't. So it does a really good job of researching business trends.
Okay,
I really enjoy it. What was that?
It's just called The Hustle. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I will be on the lookout for that. And if there is one thing that all of us should try this week, could be anything, could be a food or an exercise or whatever. Like, what's one thing, if we could all try it, that you would have us try?
Ooh. So say it one. I would say, so give me a food, a book, or
it could be anything that you think that people should try. So it could be like everyone should try to go to brandyourself.com and type their name in.
I do think, and this is a shameless plug, but I do think everyone can get a scan at brandyourself.com for free, and it will give you at least a lot of food for thought of things that, whether it's your privacy, your security, your brand, your social media, it'll give you a lot to, like I said, we give a lot away for free,
Right.
which helps you, I think, understand where your opportunities or weaknesses or vulnerabilities are.
I love that. Okay. And then the last one is, what is one thing that you are really hoping to get better at before the end of the year?
I am really hoping to get better at, I think, actually communicating, I think, with my team remotely. I think everyone's facing that issue.
Yeah.
Our office culture was always like, hey, let's go into the conference room. And when I say communicating, I mean communicating beyond like work. I need this done and we need this, because I don't think the one thing we haven't replaced in remote is like the social aspect of work. Like, oh, I've got 10 minutes to kill, and I go and talk to some of the team about Netflix or whatever's going on in sports. And it's something you wouldn't normally fire up a Zoom to talk about. But I think that's really important, because I think, that added up, there's probably at least half hour a day that's really nothing to do at work, and it's just talking about bonding things. And I don't think I want to find a way to figure out how to, replace that in a way that, kind of gets some of that back. So it's not so, we got to talk about what your to-do list is and what we're getting done. I'd love to figure out a way by the end of the year to get some of that back.
Well, when you figure it out, you're going to have to spill the beans on that one, because I think a lot of people are trying to solve that. And I'll be sure to ask that next week. I have Luke Reisman coming on from PGA of America. I don't know if you watch golf, but super smart guy. He does all of their big brand partnerships. So when you see like the PGA golf tournament with like the Amex logo, that is all his negotiating and hard work. So I'm super excited to have him next week, but I'll be sure to ask him that question, because I think you're right, Patrick. Like, everyone is going through that right now, and we're all trying to figure it out. How can people keep learning from you and kind of getting these nuggets of wisdom from your brain to their brain?
I think if you can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Ambron. But I also think, like I said, if you sign up for brandyourself.com for free, aside from that, initial audit and tools we give, you get a lot of information from that related to these topics. We put a lot of free resources, a lot of free content, and a lot of free software tools to help you kind of navigate this. So I really recommend everyone check it out, because at the very least, it kind of highlights some of what you might want to be thinking about.
No, 100%. We're signing off, and I will be the next tab that opens on my Chrome will be brandyourself.com. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. I so loved getting to pick your brain about all of these things that I'm trying to learn about in real time. And I think all of us are trying to learn about in real time. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you everybody else for joining and asking such great questions, and letting us have a good chat on a Wednesday. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, everybody have an awesome Wednesday. Sending a big cheers from me to you. Have a great week.
See you later.
Bye.